Okay, in this video I'm going to be talking about three components each chapter that contributed to not necessarily my change in belief, but my change in perspective. So first chapter, chapter 7, language and culture. I'd say first term, enculturation. Enculturation is the process in which uh, somebody that comes from a different culture has to live in a different culture rather than what's in their like natural realm. Or basically, think about it like this: it's like present tense, like you're enculturating yourself into something. So uh, I like this because it pretty much feeds off of everything else within this chapter about culture, because people have to do this every single day. Uh, they have to socialize, uh, and pretty much get used to the dominant culture any place they're at. You could be, say, you could be the only lone white kid in an African American school in just like one class, and you'd have to enculturate yourself within that class because, I mean, it's going to be hard for you to make friends otherwise. Um, so that's what uh, usually like a lot of minorities are going to have to face. So that's one concept. Ebonics, second concept. It kind of goes hand in hand. No, I wouldn't say hand in hand with acculturation, but it's connected. Ebonics would be using pretty much like black slang. So like uh, it'd be like using trying to think, just like how African Americans pretty much talk to one another versus how usually like a dominant culture like white people would talk to each other. Uh, this is important within acculturation because a lot of times, like the example I just gave, somebody that is white in African American school is going to have to enculturate themselves within this idea of ebonics. So a lot of times they will adopt that kind of like form of speaking. It's kind of like uh, if you're like to compare the way like I would say Cajuns speak versus just regular like Californians. You have a clear and concise language of English versus kind of like broken, different kind of form of speaking, if that makes sense. Third term would be bilingualism. A lot of people have to deal with that every day, and this is something I never like really thought of. I certainly, and this is, I certainly wouldn't take the time to learn a new language, but at the same time, I wouldn't reject that language. If you want to use that language in class, use it within your socialization. Uh, but like, as far as the curriculum is concerned, I feel like you should stick to whatever everybody else is speaking. Otherwise, you're not gonna fit in. And this is important though too at the same time, because if somebody struggles to speak English, that is my job to get them help uh, in order to either get rid of an accent or understand the language a lot more. Uh, Moving on. Chapter 1, culture. Uh, I would say dominant culture is definitely a term that stuck with me. Never heard this term before, but it would just be basically like the majority. So like what everybody else usually has to stick to within a large basis. That's important because you see that literally like everywhere. So yeah, it's kind of like shaped the way I've looked at things because I've never really had to deal with having to like enculturate myself into somebody else's realm because I am part of the majority technically. Cultural pluralism definitely stuck with me. I like this idea. It's like living life as a functioning society for everybody else, which in a perfect world, this would be this would be ideal, but unfortunately, you have stuff like currency that kind of puts this divide on everybody, kind of creates social classes, and yeah. But I like this idea. Like it would be in a perfect world, yeah, this would work. But and it does work. Usually, a lot of like curriculums when we're all on the same level, but in the real world, we're never really on the same level, and that's kind of why we've looked deeper into this, and that's kind of how it's changed my perspective on it. Lastly would be social justice. I didn't really know what this was. I thought it was just like the fight for equality. It's more so equity. So, a good example, you have three people at a baseball game, and they're all three different heights, and they all have the same box to look over the fence, right? That would be equality. But what if that shortest person still can't see over the fence, right? And that tallest person, even if you just stood up, you can see over that fence, right? So the idea of equity or social justice is helping those that are like weaker in some areas due to either like genetics or just the way that like they're enculturated, the way they are, you know. So yeah, that's like how that's stressed within that. On chapter 11, idea that stuck with me, hidden curriculum is exactly what it says. It's just hidden rules that aren't necessarily like taught or perpetuated within a classroom, right? So raising your hand before you speak. I was never taught that. I just saw that everybody did it, and I was like, okay, this is what's going on. But a lot of times you have problems with people of different cultures and stuff. I know Asian culture, if you look somebody in the eyes that's of authority, that is considered disrespectful, right? And a lot of people might consider it disrespectful as an authority figure around in Western culture. If you're not looking them in the face, it makes them feel like you're not listening to them, right? That would be a hidden rule. Look at me when I'm speaking to you, and you expect that, right? But at the same time, we have to be conscious of these things, and that's exactly why we took an in-depth look at that. Multicultural curriculum, another key concept. Exactly what it says. Make sure you're not just teaching like the perspective. I'm a history teacher, so like I'm not just going to be teaching the perspective of the winning side. I will, at my best, try to teach it from multiple perspectives, right? You can't, especially in history, I want to believe everything that I'm reading is factual, but at the end of the day, I'm trusting another human being in a different time to kind of write down what's going on. And as we all know, humans aren't really the most accurate source. So it's really the dependability is all on humans. And when you get multiple perspectives on multiple different primary sources, then you will have a deeper understanding of actually what was happening, say, within World War II, right? So, yeah. Moving on to chapter 3, social capital. Basically, I didn't know this, but it's kind of self-explanatory now that I know it now. Social capital would just be pretty much your social status within society, the contribution you have in society as far as economics. This plays a role because we get separated into social classes, which then it creates problems in education because those in a lower social class usually their parents aren't as educated. You're not hearing as many words. It makes a difference subconsciously. Things we don't really notice, right? Well, this is a lot harder than I thought. The cycle of poverty. So there's situational poverty, which is like, say, when I graduate, I'm going to be fresh out of college. Say I apply for food stamps because I'm trying to pay off my student loans. I'm a school teacher. I don't get really paid that much, and I'm only on food stamps for like a year or two just to get myself on my feet. That would be a situational, whereas generational is it goes generation from generation to generation, and that usually continues just because of the mindset and ideology and the belief that you're not good enough to keep up with people that already are ahead of you in the game, right? Now, that's not saying that that's the root cause of this generational poverty. To be honest, some people are just lazy and won't want to get out of that mindset. But me as a teacher, I have to make sure I'm recognizing those that are in a lower social class, just because they're not usually going to get that motivation at home, and they're going to have usually a rougher life than anything I could ever fathom, because I've never really had a, as far as non-stable economic status. Moving on. Alright, last two things are gender and sexual orientation. These can kind of intermingle, so I'm just going to clear the water right now. Gender, as of right now, is the social construct of, like, basically, it's how you feel on the inside as of right now. That's part of sexual orientation, because part of sexual orientation are transgenders. That's exactly what a transgender is somebody that identifies with something different than what they biologically are. So clearing the water right there. That's one of my things is gender identity within both of these two chapters. I mentioned this in the first video. My perspective has been enlightened. It's basically just giving me a different perspective on the life of transgenders, especially now that I've seen like the rates of harassment that happen to especially that group, not just gays or lesbians, but transgenders got it worse than anybody as far as harassment. So yeah, there's that. I found one thing really interesting, didn't know, or didn't look at it this way. Males are very like impulsive in their decisions, and they'll take like a lot more risk as children, whereas girls are usually pretty resilient as far as like, not resilient, they'll listen to what they're told a lot of the time. A lot of that has to do with chemicals that are different chemicals going through both their bodies at the time. Little boys are going to move a lot, and a lot of times that results in getting in trouble a lot more often. You can even make the argument that elementary school it conflicts like boys rather than girls, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm just saying it's very interesting. It shaped the way I look at children, honestly, because I notice men or like boys seem to make like really silly decisions, whereas girls they are usually pretty good until I would say about high school, junior high age, when we start making like life and adult decisions for some of us. And then the last one for gender is gender stereotypes. There's all kinds of stereotypes about both men and women. Ones I never really thought about were that we got taught were men are taught to be emotionless. Don't cry. Don't be a sissy. Don't throw like a girl. Yeah. Whereas girls are taught to show their emotion, which is probably part of the reason why, plus the chemicals, again, that are running through both gender's bodies, probably why girls are more emotional than men. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. Last one. So pansexual, that's one that was really new to me. Basically, you're not attracted, you don't have a sexual attraction to really anything. though I don't understand how that's possible. It's very enlightening, and it makes me like really, I don't know, just gives me a different perspective on humans, I guess. And then cisgender, I thought this was interesting just because I've never heard of it before, and it's finally like a key term for like people like me. Uh, Basically, you're attracted to uh, the opposite. Uh, so like I would be attracted to femininity, whereas females would be attracted to masculinity, right? And that doesn't necessarily. I mean, you don't have to be necessarily straight because, yeah, that's just a whole uh, complex argument to get into there. That is pretty much it for this section.